But for example, when I shoot skies, which is often, and oftentimes I'll shoot when the sun is like going behind clouds so you can see the outline of the brilliant outline. Well, it's important for me that those clouds be printed deeply, that they have a tonality to them so that the brilliance of the sun shows through as a circle of light. And so the squandering of white in so many prints that are made by photographers and particularly by machines, oftentimes I'll ask them, print it deeper, go deeper. They're afraid to, because just as beginners are afraid in the darkroom to go too deep, because they don't want to lose any of the detail in the shadow area. And there's a timidness. Now, one of the great lessons in printing in a darkroom come from mistakes where you've made a print too dark. It's so dark, and suddenly in that darkness you see tonalities that are delicious. I've been speaking about white, but then we come look over here how bright it is, and then look right over here at the bulb itself. Now it's important that you don't squander white when you make a print. In other words, if like when I look at a photograph of a sky, if it's all white, you lose all the tonality of the clouds. But what if in that light you have the sun? How will you differentiate the quality of the sun, that brilliance of bright light, compared to the rest of the bright sky? So you save the white only for very select picture areas, like right over here. You save the white of the paper so that you then can maintain the illusion of white but still show the brilliance of a diamond, of a sparkle in the water, relative to everything else that's bright. And so when you're looking at a face, like, look at the highlights, look at the shadow areas, look at the gradations of tone. They're part of it. And so that when the hand is in a certain way, it reveals itself another way it doesn't. Look at the movement, everything, it's a composer writing notes. The juxtaposition of notes one to another. It's only the variation of one note to the other that allows the sound of music to be heard. It's the changes. It's also the silences, the brilliances, the piercing sounds, the soft tones. All of this is your repertoire, and you want to use them. And to use them, you must first become conscious of them. So we say, oh, there's a pretty picture of a flower. Yes, that's true. But what is it? What is it about that picture? What is it that makes that quality of that peonese? So when you look at a print, look at it not simply as a picture. It's a living organism of tonalities on a piece of white paper. Now, the photographer doesn't work with sound or words, oftentimes. For most of the time, the photographers weren't even working with color. So it was in that limited range between brilliant white down to the blackest black, and every tone within, that all that could be said in a print had to be contained. So those are precious notes. But even when we get to color, the same applies, even though we have different colors as well as values. So start looking at your work that way as well. Start realizing that a picture of a flower or a face will never be a flower or a face. Just touch it. If you touch it, you feel it, you'll know for sure it's not a face. What it is a piece of paper. And what makes that piece of paper come alive? But a series of tonalities. The tonalities are your repertoire, your palette. They're precious. Whether the photograph be a literal rendition of a face or a flower or an abstraction of tonalities, does it vibrate? Does it quiver? Does it have a quietness? Is there a long silence in it? In the tonality, just in the tones alone. Start seeing it, not only emotionally in terms of subject matter, but in terms of tonality and texture and shape and compositions that are occurring within this rectangle or square. It's a living shape within itself. And now they're going further. Now they're cutting out the few lovely things that happened in the schools when I was young. They're cutting those out as extracurricular. Test upon test upon test, destroying teachers and destroying students for the numbers that have no meaning. But everybody will know because they'll see a number. They'll see an A or a B or a C or a D, and they say, I got it. That's all they want. And the unknown scares the shit out of everybody. This gift, this friend, the nature of life. Running away, trying so hard to build an obstacle, to build a dam. Keep out the unknown. Keep it out. Keep out the gift. Watch out. There's something unknown coming. They call that unknown life. That's what it is. It's life itself. It's the creative juice. It's all the whole, all that spiritual. It's all that marvelous. Unfolding, almost in spite of ourselves. Now, I believe there is a perfection in our lives. In any path that we take, there's a rightness to it. And those events that are difficult, contrary, painful, are part of what this life is about in terms of leading us in one path or another in what our journey is. For example, I remember at times of AA, people would say, well, I'm grateful for being a drunk because it brought me to these meetings where I can now begin to become conscious of my life. And so oftentimes the pathway we take, however it is, has a rightness to it, even though we certainly wouldn't advise anyone to become a drunk. So it's not to feel guilty, it's not to feel what's wrong with us, but just to look at it as it's occurring and understanding the nature of our participation in the creation of what this life is. That we are not victims, that we are not without choice, because in a sense we are creating each moment that we have. When creating each moment we have is not simply in deciding what one will do, we're actually creating the thoughts that we have as to how we will feel. So that, what is a moment like? I mean, is a room dingy, or dark, or dull, or low light, or quiet, serene? Expansive. Are we simply the victims of all the occurrences of weather and circumstances? How are we responding to it? What are we taking from it? Because undoubtedly, each one of us is going to fall on our ass at various times in our life. Each one of us will find moments to cry, moments of anguish, as well as many moments of joy. And I don't believe that there's a malicious intent from the Creator in what all these aspects of life contain. I do believe that we are on a journey of enlightenment. Some of the journeys go like this, and then a couple of steps back, and this way, but we're moving towards it in different ways in our own capacity. But as my good friend Thoreau has mentioned, an unexamined life is not worth living. It's important that we look at it, just to see it, and say, oh yes, look what I'm doing now. Look what I'm not doing now. Look how I'm responding to this moment. I remember this time in a room in a house in Vermont that I had mentioned. Beautiful 300-year-old house. Old, a bit worn down, but still beautiful. And I was sitting in this room and I was about to think about whoever she was at the time. Why wasn't she here with me now? It seems that many times in my life, whoever she who I hadn't yet met, or she who I had met and been gone, or she who was totally my life, was not there. And I watched as I was getting into a whole thing and just ready to go into a nice good funk. I stood outside of myself and watched it. And I asked myself, are you ready to go on this trip again? Because it wasn't the first time, you understand. And part of me looked back up and said, if I want to go this way, I'll go this way. But once you hear that, once you become conscious of it, once you see the routine that has become, you look at it. And as I looked at it, I looked around the room and I looked through the window. There were lace curtains that you could see through. There was beautiful trees outside. There was a horse in a pasture. There was a breeze, and the curtains were moving in the breeze. There was a lovely old and tasteless wallpaper on the wall. And I became present. I became fully present in the here and now. And I was feeling better. And enjoying just being where I was. Not what I wasn't, but what I was, and what was it right at that moment. And I became aware, basically, of transforming what could have been a mournful, moaning experience into one that was filled with the joy of being fully present. Then, afterwards, as I realized the power to do this, I thought, well, why be a piker? Why simply settle for being all right when you're feeling down? Why not some point of elation? And so I would focus my mind in areas that were elating to me. And it became very clear that our environment is a projection of our consciousness, as much as anything else, or maybe more than anything else. There was a period of time when I gave up photographing, when I understood this power, when I understood in a deep inner way that I was in a sense creating my life moment by moment, I thought for a while, well, why do I need photography? I mean, why am I putting so much energy into making pictures? And I thought, well, maybe I'll start making photographs. Being that it's all emanating from within, then why continue with this photography? Now, so I stopped, or so I thought I did. I mean, it was so, to photograph was such an intuitive focus of energy for me that I still was taking photographs, but in my mind's eye, in my sense of myself, I had given up photography for the duration. And then at one point, I thought, well, it's okay. I realize I can live, and I can live well without photography. On the other hand, I love doing photography, so why not? And I went back into it with relish. And when I went back into it, not only with relish, but I abandoned many of the strictures, of the dogmas that I considered important philosophies when I was younger. And came more fully in touch with the sublime joy of making pictures. The act itself, not related to the finished product, but to the act of photograph, the act of contemplating an image. And of course, the continuous surprise of what a wonderful photograph could be like, that emanated from my own energy. Sense of knowing. It's a sense of like discovering. And sometimes these quick moments that you don't even see barely, you just feel it, you just go click, and that captures it. So don't become intimidated and say, well, gee, there's so much I don't know and understand. It's a process of finding. You're always finding out. You're always finding out. And it's wonderful. It's endless. You don't get there. It's the journey itself. The journey itself. And there are wonderful way stations along the way, which magnificent, thrilling discoveries are made. But as much as they are, it's the process that's continuously changing. So you make a discovery, and and so you want to hang around a while and explore it. You explore this view, wow. And soon you want to run, so to speak. So you're so really hot on certain kind of imagery, and it keeps popping up again and again. And you run with it. And it doesn't go away, but at some point, whether we're talking a year later, or 6 months later, or 2 years later, something else comes to the fore for you. And you run with that. It's not that you were looking for it. See, you don't look for pictures, the pictures are looking for you. Your pictures are looking for you. You don't look for them. You see. And it's like a vacuum, and it sucks in your imagery. And it's your thrill of it, it's your commitment to it, it's your openness to it, your readiness to it, your acting upon the yes, upon the movement that draws in your type of imagery. And it has a form that is unique as you are. All your work ends up being a portrait of a photographer. And you'll discover nuances about yourself that you probably never even knew about or thought about, until they're revealed to you in your photography. And this is one of the great gifts of photography. It's not what you were looking for, it's what found you. It's what drew you. And it's both effortless and much work. interwoven. And so the line between play and work is finally drawn, and sometimes isn't even there. And you forget about it. You just know that this is great stuff. And so it's serious business, and you want to burst out laughing. How did you do that? How did you ever get, what did you do? How did you, I don't know, how did you get this? You know, there's these questions as though there was a formula, something I knew. Oh! It's following that playfulness. Saying yes to what draws me. It's the curiosity, it's the finding out, it's the fun. And the continuum. And surrendering to it when you finally understand this is the way to go. This is the way to go. And when I reach then certain play stations along the way that are revelations, I come back again this way, and I come back to this side, and I look at it, and then I do it. And so much is happening so quickly that I almost can't see it all while it's happening. I'm making the pictures, and I'm not seeing. I just know it feels good. I'm going to stick around a while. And so then I put the pictures away, and I come back to them, and I look at them, and I say, wow, look what's happening here, look what's happening here. And it opens another door within that same milieu. And so I walk into that door, and I go out on a limb. I lose all sense of taste, of decor, of acting your age, whatever that might be. And I take a bath. I bathe in it. And I trust it. Sacred space. Joyful space. And it's not what I know that made it happen. The only thing I know is not to resist it, to go into it and find out, and find out, and find out, and to be totally uncritical. It's to catch that magic puff of desire as it flies. And reach for it. However, just reach for it. I just want, yeah, where is it? Okay. And so you become very limber. And with your yeses, and you go with it, and you're playful, you leave go of all preconceptions and all ideas and all concepts of what art is and should be and can be. And you just move into it, into that unknown. And then from this miasma, things begin to take shape. And the chances are that more often than not you will recognize the shape it's taken. But you just say, well, yes, I'll go with it. I'll go with it. And long after it's done, you might know, you might see it. And so if someone says, well, how did you do that? What do you say? And that's why I always like Einstein's answer to the question, how do I work? He said, I grope. I grope. And I love the groping. There you go. It's a joyous adventure. It becomes more so. Main subject and background, as we normally think of it. The whole canvas, the whole rectangle or the square is the picture. And it all operates with a life of its own. Now, oftentimes, the gestalt of it, which happens in that moment, really says it all, even when you're not paying attention. Mm-hmm. But because we're photographers, and because we're interested, we are all interested in what happens on that page. Mm-hmm. And something happens on that page that transcends what we saw. Something else happens. And that, what happens on that page intrigues me. Mm-hmm. And so become involved in that and see, well, what's going on here? What is happening in that corner that works, or that in fact distracts? What complements, or what note is either harmonious or juxtaposed in a way that it works even better? And so you start looking at all of it. Suddenly you're in the business now. You're in the kitchen. You might as well like look around and look at all the spices and all of what have you, and just see what's making it taste the way it tastes.
That's after you've taken the initial.
Before, after, during. I mean, you forget everything when you're taking pictures. On one hand, you just go. Basically, your mouth drops open. Click the shutter. But then you start looking at what's happening when your mouth drops open. What is it? And you start seeing more. So the next time, something else is going to come into what makes your mouth drop open. Because you are teaching yourself through the discoveries along the way from that which was not preconceived, but discovered in the steps that you were taking, and the accidents that occurred, and the whims. That becomes your teacher. And it becomes all involved, and it's continuously, it's fluid, it's expanding, and yet there's a certain consistency in the sense that there's a consistent personality that we are, through which the entire cloth is woven. And the amazement and the surprise is that it shows up. For all the different ways we've gone in our journey, the central thread of our soul shines through. And if that can happen, then you know you're in a medium that you love. People don't look. Life goes by. Everyone, these eyes become just so there just so you don't trip over something, it seems. And so this is what I guess keeps us in business as photographers. People say, gee, I never saw that. Oh, whatever you show them. Whatever you show them. You show them a hand, you show them a face, you show them a flower. Gee, I never saw that. Well, of course you never saw that. You weren't looking. I mean, it's not magical. There's nothing magical that we employ. Oh, you must have great cameras. Oh, what kind of a lens do you have? What kind of film are you using? Oh! They don't understand. It's looking. It's seeing. It's being present. And rejoicing in this presence as the gifts abound. And it's so rich, and there's such an abundance, and so much to see that you go through not one but multiple lifetimes and still see only a small portion of all there is to be seen. Now, thinking in terms of the art world, how most of the focus is always on what's new, the latest thing. Whether it's using elephant dung on a painting or whatever it may be. But the truth is that when one sees what is truly present, it is always new. It stands to reveal itself. These blades of grass will reveal themselves as something thrilling and new, as seen again and again. And each artist rediscovers the truth that is brand new. No matter how many times the subject has been covered, it becomes new when it's elegantly shown. For all that's been said, multitudes of words that have been written about life, each one of us has a story to tell. Each one of us has a life to bear witness to in a way that's never been said before. There may be certain similarities, of course, connections, universalities. But we stand to discover it for the first time, and it's thrilling. And we don't have to go to another continent to discover it. Although sometimes this helps. I mean, people going to a foreign country see things they're looking anew. But one could look at any facet of life, be it a blade of grass, a cloud, a hand, a face, a body, a mountain range, and rediscover something in a way that's never been said before. For me, my aspiration has always been to say something in a way, to show something in a way that people will feel they're seeing it for the first time. And this is why we must not be daunted by the fact that everything has been covered. The word research, to research again and again, to find our own voice, to utter in our own way, with our own vision, in our own manner, in our own dialect. And not be taught simply to memorize all that has gone before and tested on that. It stands for us to discover it for ourselves, and only in this way can we be free. Because otherwise we accept the dogma of our time, whether it be about relationships, be it about gender, be it about art, whatever. We have to see it anew as the child who uttered, "Hey, the emperor ain't wearing clothes." And so why isn't there rejoicing? And so why isn't there rejoicing at the sight of a weed? This is the weed I ran out of the house to rescue before the man came with the mowing. And later you'll come up and you'll see that, look at this closely. And look at the elegance of this weed, this flower. And that night, I looked at the photograph and I said a prayer. And this song emerged. In this blade of grass, I see your wonder. I see your strength. I see your beauty. In your grace, I see the spire of my soul's journey. So what kind of field trip do we need to take our children on? Where must we take them? What about in the backyard? Anywhere to see. What textbook do we need? On Life Abounds, with so many things that are obvious. We don't see the obvious. And so the lure of photography is that we're provided with a medium that gives us an excuse, an urgency to see, to look, to isolate within that rectangle something from all that surrounds us, that we live amongst. And in that isolation that causes us to focus more clearly on any given, be it a child's shoe, a blade of grass, a face, a hand, or even a crowd of people, we discover something that has hardly been seen before. It's been seen, it's been looked at, but it hasn't been seen. And that's why with great art, there's always this shock of recognition. Oh, I've seen that. Oh, yes. But at the same time, they haven't. There's a recognition that strikes home from an old friend who's been around for a long time but hasn't been closely seen. But there's much more than that. There's much more than that. There's so much more than we know about ourselves. Because not only have we put people who are close to us in a certain pigeonhole or category, we've put our own selves in this category, in this pigeonhole, and we no longer can see the magnificence, the vistas of whom we are. You see maybe this much. And so the life becomes a way of reopening our eyes, of re-looking and re-seeing not only our mate, not only our neighborhood, not only the lawn and the garden in front of our home, but our own selves. Because this familiarity that breeds contempt causes us to surrender, to cease the discoveries, the voyage of discoveries, the paths that are open to us, the vistas that are so uniquely ours and so specially ours, with the nuances of born of the particular brilliance that each one of us has. We become lazy couch potatoes about our own life. We're waiting for it to be served up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Look again. Rediscover it. And the psychology of doubt, of self-assurance, of belief or disbelief, I believe is the primary, is the essence, not simply of one's performance, but of one's life. And let's face it, we've been sabotaged in this area. And so when we see anyone walking in their own stride with a sense of self-belief, self-confidence, we watch a certain kind of grace that we yearn for. And so it's the nourishment of this self-confidence which in a sense we create moment by moment and day by day, which has had to overcome and is still fighting to overcome the doubt that has been instilled within us. That becomes a determining factor in our lives. In terms of the quality of work, I mean, I've worked with multitudes of people over the years, from absolute beginners on and well into their careers. And the differences that I've seen have not been one of talent, but rather one of self-assurance. How often have you heard of well-known actresses, actors, people whose capability is so ridiculously evident, speak of self-doubt? So it's not something that simply belongs to those who have not been given worldly recognition. The questioning of oneself, of who one is so pervasive. So the question of trust in oneself is the single most important element in one's capability to achieve as well as to enjoy this life. It frees the hand to move. It frees the words to emerge in an utterance that is coming right from the belly of our soul. It encourages one to try this and experiment with this and play with that and make that move over there, that grand gesture, and that very silly offbeat movement over here. So there's a playfulness and a looseness and a grandeur all at once that can operate without this self-questioning, self-judgment, which is so crippling, as each one of us knows. And so I see within myself as I internalize more and more the realization of my own beauty, how it affects my work, even though my work from the very beginning was great and wonderful. Even though, I mean, I've seen work, the quality has not changed, except I'm moving less impeded by doubt, by self-doubt. And so it's not that I'm making better pictures, but they're flowing from me. They're flowing in so many ways, and there's so much joy, and there's a graciousness of self-recognition. And oftentimes, when most people tend to discount compliments of any nature, my thought is, and occasionally my comment is, forget about ego or blowing one's horn, but being gracious about the gifts that we have. This continuous discounting of whom we are is a lack of graciousness for the gift that we are. After all, we were all created by the same wondrous Spirit. So who are we criticizing when we criticize ourselves? What has this got to do with modesty or ego? Is it not, in fact, an overblown sense of self-importance in a negative way that makes us criticize everything move we're making as though we're on trial? I mean, watching the lack of self-consciousness of a child at play, where the self-evaluation is not occurring, but simply the form of its playfulness. It shows you this movement that's so wonderful. So what I'm finding after many years is that I'm being more playful and more childish and more gracious in the acknowledgement and recognition and enjoyment of my gifts. There's less resistance to going into the place of work. Work being what I love. Less hesitation, less doubt. I used to advise students in terms of darkroom work, when you're going in to make a print, always begin a session in the darkroom with a sure winner, with a picture that's easy, that looks terrific, and you don't have any questions about it. Because if you get all entangled up in a very difficult negative fight at the beginning, you're going to expend such an amount of energy that it'll sort of cramp your style for the session. So begin with a few winners. Now, what are a few winners, besides the fact that they seem obvious or they're technically fine? It's that we see them that way. Because I know once I get in the darkroom and I would work on get one or two good prints made, then the rest flow. But if I start with one that's I really have doubts about it, questions about it, the energy just doesn't flow in that way. And so as the sense of my own self has grown, I find I'm beginning again and again with the beginnings. And of course, now when I say beginning again and again with the winners, I'm not saying that every one that I photograph that I make is great, because I just begin just knowing that there's something great, something extraordinary is happening, something sacred is happening in my work. At the end of the day, at the end of the session, I might say, well, this didn't work out, and they go on to the next one. It's just, but so many images are being produced that there's not a great investment, so what if one picture doesn't work out, or this doesn't work out? I don't focus on the problem of it, I simply focus on the joy of the work, and then the occasional one that is so extraordinarily beautiful. With all of this comes something else that's called commitment and work. I work. Now, it just so happens I love my work, and it's fun, and it's my play, but I'm working, but I'm doing it.